So, and the recording will be accessible to all conference attendees after the session. But again, this is session number 12, Suddenly Digital, Acquiring Pragmatic Digital Archival Skills on the Job. Before we dive in, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping notes. So first, we'd like to thank Preservica Inc. for sponsoring this session and making this virtual conference possible. Preservica is changing the way organizations around the world protect and future-proof critical long-term digital assets. Their digital preservation software has been designed from the ground up to tackle unique challenges of ensuring that digital assets remain accessible and trustworthy over decades. Next, I want to take a moment to highlight MERAC's Code of Conduct. MERAC is dedicated to fostering a harassment-free environment in all of its spaces. As we gather here to learn, connect, and have fun, let's commit to doing so with kindness and respect for one another. I'll share the link to the Code of Conduct in the chat for your reference in just a moment. Another thing I want to note, live transcripts are available for this session for accessibility purposes. To enable them, just click on the captions tab at the bottom of your screen. And if your Zoom window isn't maximized, you can click on the three dots for the more icon to turn them on. And then one other thing is I want to remind everyone to check out our pre-recorded poster sessions and virtual tours on YouTube. I'll also put a link to that in the chat. But yeah, finally, now I'll introduce our speaker for today. So Emily Higgs-Copen is the head of digital collection strategy at Swarthmore College Libraries in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, where she oversees digital asset management and preservation for library-owned assets, particularly in our archives and special collections. Previously, she has worked as a digital archivist since 2018. And yeah, Emily, take it away.
Great, thank you so much. Swarthmore and Swarthmore are both totally valid ways to say it, depending on who you ask. So both ways were actually correct. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you to you, Miyako, and also to Carolyn backstage for providing support, and of course to our sponsor. So welcome to my presentation / workshop entitled Suddenly Digital, Acquiring Pragmatic Digital Archive Skills on the Job. My name is Emily Higgs-Copen. As we said, I'm the head of digital collection strategy at Swarthmore College Libraries. This title could be many different things, but what I actually do in my job is I support all of the platforms and systems and digital asset management ecosystem that allows the digital archivists for our special collections and archives to be able to do their jobs. And I was working as a digital archivist in one of our special collections up until about a year ago. So this is a relatively new position for me. My background is I've been working in libraries for on and off for 10 to 15 years. And I went into my MSIS program really intending to carve out a niche for myself that was really digital archives focused. That is not how I think most of us come to this work. I think that there are people who know that they want to be digital archivists, who know they want to work with born digital materials, who embark on this career path, but I think much more common are people who come in with a generalist archivist background and who are kind of by necessity having to learn how to handle born digital collections and born digital materials at their institutions, whether they just need coverage in that area or they're a team of one, a lone ranger. I think that there are a lot of people out there that I have spoken to at MERAC and other conferences who do not have a formal digital archival education and who are looking for ways to accomplish what they need to accomplish in their jobs with regards to digital archives without actually going back to school or doing something super formalized in terms of education. So that is kind of the audience that I imagined for this presentation / workshop. So just a note that if that doesn't sound like it's going to be useful for you, or there was something else that you wanted to see instead of this presentation at this time, there are lots of good programming opportunities right now, and feel free to leave this webinar and go see another session if that is where your heart leads you. I will not be offended. So getting started with our agenda, I'll spend about 5 minutes, or I have spent about 5 minutes talking about just an introduction to this topic and my connection with it, which, as you heard, I am trained as a digital archivist, but I'm also just kind of really passionate about making this work more accessible to people who don't see themselves kind of empowered as like tech people, or who don't have formalized education in this area. So I'm going to talk for an estimation about 40 minutes, and I have a presentation and a handout for everybody who's here, and that will also be available in the Merrick repository after the presentation. And then we're going to spend kind of the second roughly half of the session doing something that I'm envisioning as sort of a crowdsourced Q&A. And what that means, if you've ever been to maybe the Bit Curator Users Forum and been to their Great Question session, that's something that I really admire and love and enjoy every time I attend it. And I think that just providing space for people to ask questions, not necessarily to me, but to kind of everybody with expertise in the room, and to get some advice, some tips, some pointers for how to get started in that area, specifically in digital archives professional development, which is what we're talking about today. I think that would be a really good opportunity. So that's what I have planned. Again, this presentation is being recorded. The crowdsourced Q&A will not, just to preserve anonymity for folks who may not want to have their name attached to their questions, which is fine. But the slides and the handout will be publicly available after this session. Okay. So if you are a person who likes to follow along with slides, I do have my slides up here. I do not have the chat up on my screen, but if somebody could just go ahead and put that link in the chat so people can click on it, I would be very grateful for that. And also, I have provided a handout which distills a lot of this information and has links to a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about today. So that is available at this bit.ly link, and a lot of that information, especially what you see in tables, is going to be replicated in my slides. So if you see a table with a lot of information in it, please don't panic. It is available for you. You do not have to try to write things down or take notes. Okay, so now that we've said all that, I'm going to start with my my first slide, which is kind of a banger. Learning to code is bad advice. A lot of people disagree with me about this, and that's fine, but let me explain. Learn to code is what you hear a lot when you get into digital archives or working with foreign digital records. And it's bad advice, I think, not because it's wrong or incorrect, that coding doesn't help you, but because it's non-specific. Learn to code is like, for example, learn to sew. It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So if I want to learn to sew, what does that really mean? Where do I start? I could start with how to thread a needle. That's probably a really good 0.1 step. But then after that, how to learn to sew really depends on what I want to do with it. If I want to learn how to embroider, if I want to learn how to mend, if I want to learn how to tailor, if I want to learn how to make my own clothes, if I want to learn how to do decorative sewing, like those are all very different classes that I could take, very different approaches. Do I want to learn to hand sew? Do I want to learn to use a sewing machine? What type of sewing machine? Learn to sew is a great kind of general elevator pitch for all of these skills, but like learn to code, it's not specific enough to really give guidance to people who are looking for a little bit more of a tangible pathway for them to learn skills that are going to be useful for them in their jobs. So one of the main things I want you to take away today is that focusing on the tools or the skill sets is often really, really overwhelming and seems like there's just so much information out there. How am I ever supposed to wade through all this on my own without institutional support, without somebody sending me to a class? I think a much better way to focus kind of your learning goals in terms of professional development, especially when it comes to digital archives and technology. What tasks do I need to accomplish? And a great place to get tasks to accomplish is a job description. So this is just some bullet points that are pulled from my former job description as digital archivist. And it is a pretty good, I think, summary of a lot of the kind of core archival functions that a digital archivist does, but that's going to vary from job to job. So if you have new responsibilities or a new position that you're in that have digital archives responsibilities, look at the job description. What are you supposed to be doing? And focus on those things first, because they're going to give you a better way to map out a path to learning than just focusing on the big, scary learning to code, learning Python, learning BitCurator, learning all of this. So we're making a map, which is kind of what we're doing today. I'm presenting to you a framework and a map pointing to a lot of different resources to help you acquire digital archive skills. The destination is important. It's not just about, you hop in a car, you've chosen to drive, so you hop in a car and then just go. You got to have a destination. This is a good place to draw those destinations. But a lot of you are not going to have really codified job responsibilities in terms of digital archives, like baked into your job descriptions. So I'm just going to start with a general recommendation of some resources that can help you get a sense of what are we supposed to be doing? What is digital archives? I kind of know on a broad bird's eye view, but like what is the nitty gritty, the day-to-day digital archivists? The Digital Preservation Coalition is just a fantastic organization and resource. And they have so many online resources that are asynchronous, that are learn at your own pace. There are courses that are formalized and have curriculums, as well as a bunch of reports and briefs and different ways of presenting information about digital archives, both to people who are maybe new to the field or are looking to upskill and have been in the field for a long time, or they also have a lot of toolkits for like presenting about our jobs as digital archivists to other stakeholders like administration, like IT teams. So the Digital Preservation Coalition is a really, really good place to start if you need a starting place. They have a novice to know-how course that I highly recommend. It's free. It's kind of an overview course. It's really good. The issue-specific technology watch publications will have more specialized information in them about things like email preservation or things that are kind of specific domains within digital preservation and that are changing constantly. Whether you're new to the field or you're not, it's constantly keeping up with kind of the new developments in the field. So that's a really good place to go. First, to kind of look for a guidepost about what am I supposed to be doing as a digital archivist. And then they have a really comprehensive digital preservation handbook that I always kind of send to people as like as a 101. It's really fantastic. I have nothing to do with the Digital Preservation Coalition. I'm not a member, but I've used a ton of their materials and I'm really indebted to the work that that organization does. So highly recommend. If you're a book person, Theory and Craft of Digital Preservation by Trevor Owens is a really, really good read. It is one of the only kind of introduction to digital preservation, digital archives books that I have read cover to cover. So that is just my book recommendation. And another source that I recommend in bite-sized pieces is the bloggers blog, which is the Society of American Archivists electronic records section blog. I was the editor of this blog like 5 years ago. It's gotten a lot better since I left. It has a lot of blog posts from digital archivists or people working in archives and libraries that is about their work, about projects that they're excited about. So it will really, reading that blog will give you a good sense of what other people in the field are doing in kind of bite-sized digestible packages. So now I'm going to backtrack a little bit from what I said a couple slides ago. A coding class, if you can take it, will definitely help you. I recommend Python as a first programming language in general. I know people hear that a lot. But what you really get out of a coding class, if you're able to take one, is a basic understanding of what you can do with a programming language, or really what you can do with computing. It will open up your imagination to kind of the things that you can automate or script or let your computer do that may be kind of laborious manual tasks. It will introduce you to the syntax of a particular coding language. I took an intro to Python class my freshman year of college, forgot it almost immediately, took another Python class in grad school, which was really helpful and specific for cultural heritage data. I met my husband in that class, which makes it a really great, fruitful class that I took, but also I kind of have to return to those materials every time I want to get right back into Python after a while away. So just a note from me that, like, if you take an intro to coding class, you're not just going to like know how to code. You're not going to remember all of those syntax elements, but it does help you identify kind of where computing can help you, which at its core is really computers are good at counting and math. Computers are good at matching patterns, and computers are really good at sorting things into categories. So those three general things, if you can match up to kind of daily tasks that you're doing, are places where you can say, oh, maybe Python will help me here. Maybe some other programming language or other type of technology can help me here. So all that to say, I think learn to code is bad advice when given generally. Taking an intro to coding class or intro to computer science class is helpful. If you can, I have colleagues that have had really great results from auditing a class, because I work at an academic institution. So highly recommend that. If you're at like an undergrad institution, there are probably opportunities for you to do that if that's something that is supported by your supervisor, which is often not. So I'm going to now move to focus on some specific tasks. And I'm going to kind of run through each task, talk about the major methods or tools that I would use kind of as a first attempt at doing these things, and then follow up with some educational resources that are, for the most part, free and asynchronous, with some exceptions. All of those are linked in the handout again. So this is going to be kind of a lot of information, but it is all distilled in that handout and recorded so that you don't have to write any of this down. So I need to run digital archiving software is a pretty good place to start. And what I mean by that is digital archivists use a lot of specialized software, and not all of it is super obvious for how to actually use it, or just like actually how to run it on your computer. So I think that this is going to be obvious to some people and maybe new to others. So bear with me if you find this at all infantilizing. But a really, really good place to start is with the command line. And the command line is at its core just an interface for your computer, no matter what type of computer you have, that's going to allow you to type in commands and run programs and run applications and do some file management through that interface. A lot of people are really scared of the command line because, first of all, like since the 1990s, up until that point in computing history, it was kind of, if you're using a computer, you're using the command line. Once these like graphical user interfaces really caught on in computing history, the Mac, the Windows, everything that you're kind of familiar with in your computing environment now, we stopped learning this. And that's okay, but it does help a lot if you're doing anything digital, to just have some basic facility with the command line. And I'm going to talk about a couple of my favorite resources for learning the command line, but there are a lot of tutorials out there, especially because a lot of programmers don't learn to use the command line, and then they learn how to do all kinds of scripting in Python, and then we're actually connecting it to your operating system through the command line. They don't actually know how to do that. So there's a lot of command line tutorials for total beginners, for computer scientists who just never learned this, for just everybody. So Google command line, how to use the command line, that's going to come up with a lot of things. But there's also some specific things that I'm going to talk about that I think are really useful, especially for archivists and librarians who are using the command line specifically to run a lot of these programs that digital archivists use. And the second thing that I'm going to be talking about with just running digital archives program is BitCurator. And BitCurator, I'm sure you've heard said, you may or may not be familiar with BitCurator and what it actually looks like and what it actually feels like to use it. But we're going to go over that a little bit today and show you kind of places to go to learn more about BitCurator. So when I say learn to use the command line, I can be talking like learn to code. That can mean a lot of different things. At the most basic level, I'm talking about this stuff. I'm talking about just copying and pasting a command that you found in the documentation for a program you want to run and using those instructions to run the program versus command line and getting your output. So here in this example, this is a command that I'm calling up Tesseract as my program. Tesseract is an OCR program. If you're unfamiliar, it takes images of text and gives you text data from that image back. So I'm typing in Tesseract, myimage.png, so whatever your actual image file is called, and then output. So what this is going to do for me is going to run Tesseract on an image that I've specified and give me an output that is called output, which is not really helpful in this case, but that's the basic syntax of running Tesseract on the command line. Easy peasy. You're casting a spell. You are learning that spell from a place on the internet where you found it. You are copying and pasting it into your terminal window. It is not as scary as people make it out to be. Most programs actually have all the documentation built into them that you can access in the command line. The command for this is usually man, which will pull up the manual entry for that program. This is my one stupid joke that I allowed myself for this presentation, is that whenever I use the man, whenever I use man to check for the manual, I say it in Jeff Bridges' voice from The Big Lebowski. I will spare you the impression, but that's maybe will help you remember. Sometimes programs don't have a manual entry, and for that you can also add -- help to the end of whatever the program name is, which will often bring up some helpful resources for you. So let's, if in my command line, in my terminal window, if I type in man grep, it's going to bring up this manual for using grep as a function in the command line. And it's going to have information about it, how to use it, probably not the most beginner-friendly place to start. There are probably better places for most programs that run on the command line that have documentation written and stored somewhere on the internet that is free for you to use. So I would definitely recommend doing that before actually installing and running the program. But when you are using a command line program and you're like, oh, I don't remember how to do this thing, or I don't remember exactly how this syntax is supposed to work, the manual is a great place to go. The other option is at the top, I've typed in Tesseract -- help, and that gives me a little TLDR, a little synopsis of how to use Tesseract and what the options are for kind of using it in its basic usage. Again, much more documentation for anything that you're running on the command line probably exists on the official website, probably user guides that will help you further. And if you're really stuck, Stack Overflow is a help forum, for an ancient help forum for coding issues. And people are often really snarky, but a lot of the times if you have a question, it's already been answered on Stack Overflow. So that is a good place to search. So for actually learning the command line, I've recommended a couple of learning paths. This first one is, I think Ashley Bluer is this presentation could just be called Ashley Bluer Can Help You. Ashley Bluer is an archivist, technologist, programmer who has worked with a variety of tools and institutions that have made all of our work lives so much better. And she has just produced I'm gobsmacked by the amount of educational resources that she has produced and put on her personal website. I've linked it here. I've linked it in a couple other places. Ashley Bluer has a great little intro to the command line. She has a great little intro to a lot of things that we're going to be talking about today. So thank you so much, Ashley, for existing and for being so generous with your expertise, especially as an educator who makes things really legible for other people. Library carpentry is another thing that you will hear me plugging a lot. Library carpentry is a really good resource for asynchronous, independent learning of a lot of these tools, but specifically in the context of like libraries and archives working with metadata. I recommend starting with actually the library specific tutorials, often the library and archive specific tutorials, because it'll give you a sense of kind of what the steps are and what you actually need to learn how to do. Just learning kind of the command line in general is going to be a little overwhelming and is going to get you into like scripting when you're starting out, you probably don't need to know right away. That being said, once you're comfortable doing this, you're going to start to see where you can like, okay, if I'm running this in the command line, can I then take that output and just automatically feed it into another program to clean it up or to do this or to do that? And before you know it, you're going to be writing little scripts. So scripting isn't actually that far off in terms of a goal for you if you're totally new to the command line. But at first, just start with how to run programs. You can do it. This is another of the resources that I have linked in my handout. It is not free. Julia Evans does a lot of really cool like little zines for programming basics and tech skills and other types of things that she's interested in. They're fantastic. I love the bite-sized command line one. I think it's $12. I think I bought it once and printed it like 8 times, and I have a bunch of copies in my house and my office. I haven't reproduced the whole thing here, obviously, because she charges for it, and want to respect that. But basically, each little page of the zine is a different, really commonly used command line utility, and it will give you kind of a rundown of how to use it. I think it's really useful. I refer to it all the time. I've been, using the command line for many, many years now, but I still, it doesn't stick in your brain a lot. So sometimes you need to revisit the syntax, and that's okay. And I love this resource for that. I'm going to move on to BitCurator, and I'm going to take a minute to explain what BitCurator actually is. You may already know what BitCurator is, but when I was first starting out in this field, I heard a lot of buzz about BitCurator, a lot of references to BitCurator, and I didn't really understand what it is or what it looked like, and I really wanted somebody to just explain it to me. And so I'm going to do that in case it's helpful. So BitCurator is not a program. BitCurator is a pre-assembled group of programs. It's mostly filled with digital forensics tools, digital forensics being the field of investigating, recovering evidence, usually in a court of law or a law enforcement situation. We as digital archivists, especially using BitCurator, have borrowed a lot of these tools from the digital forensics field to help with core archival functions. So these tools have been curated for this toolkit that we call BitCurator. And BitCurator also refers more broadly to like the community of users. So the BitCurator Consortium is a really excellent group as well that maintains a lot of educational resources, a lot of really helpful community members that are willing to answer all your questions. It's a really great place to ask questions about both the tools that come installed in BitCurator and just kind of general digital archives, software issues, niche file formats that you've never heard of. The BitCreator Consortium groups are really, really excellent for that. So this is what BitCreator actually looks like. There are two ways that you can install it. The first is to just install it directly to a computer, and that's different than like installing a program or an application to your computer like you normally do. You actually have to take the installer, put it on usually a flash drive, and then wipe the entire memory of a laptop or machine, or boot it up with that installer to install Linux, Ubuntu, BitCreator, because that's the operating system that it runs on. So you can do this with a laptop or a computer that you have specifically designated for this purpose, or you can install something called a virtual machine on your personal work computer. So a virtual machine is, and VirtualBox is the one that I link because it's free. VirtualBox you install like a regular program on your computer, and then you can pull it up, and it's basically just a little mini computer in your computer, and then you can install BitCreator on that virtual computer so that you can pull it up in your VirtualBox without like switching operating systems, and you can run that on a Windows machine or an Apple machine. As you can see, this might be an old screenshot, but it's basically got all of these different types of programs that are sorted into kind of the different digital archives functions that they help with, imaging and recovery. So actually just taking typically disks, whether it be a floppy disk or a CD-ROM or a hard drive, making copies of those disks in the form of what's called a disk image, which we'll talk about a little bit more too. And then running those disk images or individual files through a bunch of really helpful programs that pull out metadata, that run reports, that identify sensitive information for you, that you then can take all of that information and the files you got off the hard drive, the disk, whatever, and you can make a little package to store wherever you're storing your digital archives long-term. So that is an overview of what BitCreator does, because I think that is kind of a point of confusion for a lot of people who are new to the field. I put BitCreator in this section about how to run archives, digital archives tools, because it just has so many things in it, and it is really well set up for you to run things. A lot of the programs they include have both a command line interface and a GUI, a graphical user interface, which is like a window that you're used to just clicking on and doing all of your stuff within that program. And they have fantastic documentation. I have also on the handout linked to the BitCreator documentation. Sorry, I just wanted to say this so I can make sure that I'm giving accurate information. The BitCreator docs are currently being edited because they just moved from Confluence to GitHub pages. And so there's, I found a little bit of broken linkage when I was looking at it earlier today. And that is an ongoing project to clean up that documentation. But you can also, if you click on this secondary link, you can view the actual pages that make up all of their documentation in HTML format in their GitHub repository. So all of the information is still there, even if links are broken on the actual doc site. They also have a quick start guide that I've linked here that I think is really useful, and just a list of tools. Really important to know that all of the tools in BitCreator, or the vast majority of the tools in BitCreator, can be downloaded and run on another computer. It doesn't have to be just a tool that you use in the BitCreator environment. For example, ClamTK is a virus scanner that is included in BitCreator. It has a command line interface and a graphical user interface. I use it on my work Mac laptop all the time because you can also install it on your Mac. So if you are looking for tools and software packages for specific archival functions, BitCreator is a really good place to start, even if you're not actually using the BitCreator environment, because they have really well-compiled documentation about a lot of these tools and overviews of what they do. And it's just a really, really good place to look for bits and pieces that you can put into your workflow for whatever you're doing. Sorry for skipping around a little bit on the slides, but I'm going to move on. I'm already running behind on time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. Apologies for that. Another task that's really common is just transferring files either off of storage media and between storage locations. So disk imaging is kind of the big one that you probably hear a lot in terms of digital archives. Disk imaging is creating an exact copy of an entire disk. So if I put a CD-ROM, make a disk image of it rather than just copying the files off of it, I'm recreating the entire structure of the disk in my copy that includes things like system files, hidden files, and kind of the notorious, like it will sometimes find deleted files that are still inscribed on the disk in some way. So just a general note that these are digital forensics tools. So a lot of these tools are developed with the intent of finding evidence. I don't use all of them in my daily archival work because they're not specifically necessary for those things. But disk imaging, really helpful for a lot of different workflows of getting stuff off of a legacy disk or a disk that's partially corrupted. When I was being educated in digital archives, we were still kind of disk imaging everything that came through. And some places still do that. But a lot of the kind of general feeling around disk imaging has moved towards a as needed basis. Like we don't really need a full disk image of everything that people donate to our archives. And the Digital Archival Transfer, Ingest, and Packaging Group, which is called DANG with 3 N's, has created a really helpful guide to disk imaging, to how to pick when to disk image something rather than just creating a logical copy, which is what you think of just like copying the files from one place to another. And they also have like a glossary, really excellent work coming out of that group. Again, I'm not a part of any of these groups, so a lot of this presentation is just me showing you other people's work that I'm really, really pumped about. I have Ashley Bluer up here again. She has a great little intro to disk imaging. And the Bit Curator instructions have, the Quick Start Guide has instructions about how to create a disk image using Guymager, which is the disk imager that's included in the Bit Curator environment. So check that out for intros to disk imaging. The AV formats and tools section, that could be its own presentation. I'm not an AV person. Ashley Bluer is. So bookmark her website. She has so many things for you. She has a guide to pragmatic audio-visual preservation. She has a published illustrated guide to AV formats that I got for my Christmas last year, I think. She's collected open workflows for AV archive. She has an incredible amount of stuff. So this is the AV artifact atlas, for example, that is linked from her site and also on the handout. This is the first place that I would go if I'm having trouble with like an AV artifact of any kind. She also has a little training website with all of her slide decks and just has so many really legible introductions to a lot of these things. So Ashley Bluer is just the first person I would start with in terms of AV materials. The other thing I want to talk about is the Bagot Python library, and we will talk about Python a little bit and its uses. But Bagot is a specification that's really, really commonly used in digital archives. I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second. To use the Bagot specification, it's just ordering your files. I mean, we talked about taking all that stuff from your processing and turning it into a package to store. If you store it in a certain way with a certain directory structure, it's going to make it compatible with a lot of different programs that use the Bagot specification. And it's gonna be a really helpful kind of consistent way for you to store files. A lot of places use the Bagot specification. Some places don't. But the Python library, I think there used to be a graphical user interface for a program called Bagger that the Library of Congress developed. I don't think it's supported anymore, but I do have colleagues that use the GUI sometimes. But the Bagot Python library is a specific toolkit to use the Bagot specification in your work. So Ashley Bluer's work again, and then this is Baggett specification. If you're unfamiliar, just to run through this real quick. So you're taking a group of files. That group of files is called your data. So within the bag, which is the kind of container for the whole thing, the top level folder, you're going to have your data folder, which has all of your files in it that came off of your disk. You're going to have your manifest, which is just a list of all the files and their checksums. I don't have time to just go in depth into checksum stuff right now, so we can talk in the kind of collaborative Q&A more about checksums and fixity if you'd like, but that's where your checksums go, and that's where programs are going to know to take those checksums and validate them after you transfer them to a new location or whatnot. And then it's going to have information about this Baggett.txt, so it's going to have some what are called tag files, which are basically metadata files that are stored in the bag with the data so that it doesn't get lost. It's glued together. I love the Baggett specification. I will use it forever until somebody starts making me use something else, I guess. Again, that Python library is currently, I think, the best way to move files around kind of in bulk to match the Baggett specification for storage. And there are a lot of really good archivist created resources for using Baggett as well that I've linked here. So this is a big one. This is probably the meatiest one that I have here. A lot of work in digital archives is around identifying and isolating patterns in data, especially metadata, and then actually like cleaning, editing, normalizing that data. So this section is useful for digital archivists and archivists in general. Basically anybody who uses metadata, these tools are going to be useful for you. So the number one thing that I recommend learning or trying to become at least kind of basically familiar with is regular expressions. Regular expressions you may have heard of before are a language for pattern matching data in general. And there are so many good entry points to regular expressions. I've linked a bunch of them here. At the bottom, my colleague James Truitt, who is a digital archivist here, gave a great presentation workshop about regular expressions specifically at the Big Creator Forum, I believe last year. So using regular expressions is going to open up a lot of doors for you. Regular expressions are used in Python, are used in OpenRefine, are used in Excel to be able to match patterns in your data. I relearn how to use regular expressions every time I need to use regular expressions. It doesn't stick in my brain. That's okay. I have a cheat sheet taped to my wall. Almost nobody just remembers how to use regular expressions off the top of their head. So all of these resources, if you decide that you want to use regular expressions, are going to be bookmarked. Nobody keeps all of this information in their brain all the time, except for my colleague James, who I can ask, hey, how do I find words that start with A and end with a president's last name? And he'll just like rattle off the actual symbols that I'm supposed to type in. It's an amazing party trick if you go to the very specific type of party. Regular expressions have a lot of online tutorials. I like this one because it gives you kind of immediate feedback for learning how to identify and match different patterns. Go forth and learn. The second method and tool is probably familiar with you to you if you've been in archives or libraries for a while. OpenRefine is an open source application for data cleaning and transformation. It looks like this. Some people do a lot of things in Excel that are really fancy. I prefer to do things in OpenRefine. People have differing opinions about how different the functions actually are, but I really like OpenRefine, especially working with spreadsheets of data. Like in this example, this is a spreadsheet that is describing a bunch of digitized images that I'm editing into a format that will be able to be batch ingested into our Islandora instance, which is our digital asset management system. Again, library carpentry, other very excellent library created guides are there for you. And then there is Python. Dealing with any kind of data, you can use programming languages to varying levels of success. Python is a good one. Python is described as a general use programming language, which means it can be used for basically anything. It is often recommended for its legibility. Humans can read it and kind of figure out what's going on in the syntax. Once you learn Python, you may have opinions about exactly how legible it is, but it is a good place to start if you're looking to programmatically edit metadata or data. Pandas is a Python library, so a toolkit within Python specifically designed for working with messy data. I recommend starting with kind of the most basic of the basic Python syntax, learning how to actually write out lines of Python, and then skip ahead to Pandas because it's going to be a really useful tool for you. And I remember in my intro to Python classes or things that you take on like LinkedIn Learning or Khan Academy, having a lot of projects and examples that just didn't relate to me. Luckily, there are really, really, really good Python tutorials out there for librarians and archivists. Michelle Janowecki, who I believe works at Johns Hopkins, I met her at DLF this year, and it was kind of a great little convergence of people who were really excited to kind of meet the person who taught us all Python. She has really excellent Python lessons and specifically Pandas for metadata that are freely available online. Shout out to Michelle. Michelle also was in the professional development session at DLF that kind of inspired this presentation. So really, she should be on my special thanks slide. Michelle, I will add you to my special thanks slide. Library of Carpentry, again, great place to go. Ithaca Consulate, which is I'm unfamiliar with, I'll be honest, but was recommended to me really, really passionately by somebody that I trust. This is available to institutions that subscribe to Ithaca's Consulate product, which is going to be a lot of libraries because a lot of libraries will be, subscribers to JSTOR and other Ithaca products. I've never used it, so I can't comment a lot about it. But I looked at their curriculum, and it appears to be a pretty good, at first glance, pathway to learning Python, specifically for this use. This is Michelle's Python lessons wiki. Again, I just rave about this resource. I think it's really great. Another quick tip, if you're going to use Python especially, is I really, really like this thing called Jupyter Notebooks. Jupyter Notebooks are just another program that you can download, and it's a browser-based environment for you to write code, run your code, and also like annotate and use Markdown and divide it really nicely into kind of these different modules and move things around. I just think it's a really kind of pretty user-friendly way to write and test and share code. So just a quick plug for Jupyter Notebooks. That's how I learned Python. I really, I love Jupyter Notebooks. So quickly through the last couple, the couple tasks that I've identified here, luckily, web-based content, web archiving is more and more familiar to kind of generalist archivists in a lot of ways, but I have included a couple of resources for using two of my favorite tools. Archivit is a subscription-based web archiving service that crawls web pages and stores them in the Internet Archive and are accessible to you via a your institution's page in the Archivit system, as well as generally in the Wayback Machine. They generally have really good documentation. They have a lot of, I've put a screenshot of the video curriculum in here, especially when it starts getting to like quality assurance, those kinds of steps to like determining whether your crawled web pages are good, to keep them if you have to recrawl them. This is going to be really helpful because that's when it really kind of starts to get a little thorny. If your institution does not have an Archivit subscription, something that I recommend to a lot of lone rangers or like people who are interested in archiving their own web presence is Conifer. Conifer used to be called Web Recorder. Web Recorder split into two different projects. So Conifer is the web-based web archiving service that has like freemium accounts. So you can have a free account with a certain amount of data storage. You can have a paid account where you can archive and store more data in there. Both of these tools, you can take the files that are created from your web archiving and download them, which is super useful to if you want to upload them into a digital preservation system like Preservica or wherever you keep long-term digital objects for preservation. Both of these tools will allow you to do that. So Conifer is really kind of easy. They have great documentation. You essentially go to the website, you type in the URL that you want to capture. There's some options that you can mess with. You click start, and then you just interact with the actual web page. And it will record like what happens when I click on this, what happens when I play this video, which is going to catch a lot of the stuff that is blocked on other sites. Like social media really, or social media that's owned by Meta specifically, really doesn't want you crawling their sites. So they're going to have a lot of hoops to jump through for a web crawler from like say Archivit to actually capture that content. Conifer is a good place to go to supplement that, or to start a digital archive, a web archives program if you don't have an Archivit subscription. And then you just stop it when you're done, and then you have the files and you can review them, download them. I think Conifer is a really great project too. Email is a beast that I can talk about for a very long time, but I will just give you a quick, again, top tools that I think are really worth you looking at. ePad is an application developed at Stanford. They've gotten a lot of press for good reason. They've come up with this really kind of easy to use graphical interface that allow you to upload emails in file formats that are generated by most email clients like Gmail, et cetera. Do processing, do discovery, and then ultimately serve those emails to users of your archive. So ePad is a really good do-it-all kind of program. I was really shocked when I first went to like an ePad presentation at actually how easy to use it was. I was expecting something a little bit more involved, a little bit more command line heavy. I think this is a really, really excellent project, and I'm very grateful for the work that Stanford has done on this. The other thing is a relatively new project called Mailbag. This, I believe, is at the University of Albany, but I will have to check on that. Greg, I have seen present on it a couple of times, and I think it's really, really great. So we talked about the Bagot specification. So what this Mailbag project is doing is kind of replicating a bag, but for email specifically. And then they've created an application that has both a command line interface and a graphical user interface that will allow you to take these emails from their exported form and then run them through this program to organize them into a mailbag, and then also like create PDFs for access. There's a lot of different things that it'll do. I think it's an excellent project. I use it because we use the Bagot specification. It was really easy for us to just plug this into our workflow to deal with emails. I recommend that if you're just like starting out with email archiving and preservation. I think Mailbag is a really good way to go initially. Okay, one more. This one has a couple of tools and also a weird curveball that I like to throw at people. As digital archivists or working with digital archives, you're going to work with weird formats. I'd say like 20% of a digital archivist's time is like doing the routine stuff, the PDFs, the Word documents that come in, the external hard drives, the things that are easy to plug into a modern computer. And then the other 80% is just like banging your head against these weird little things, right? A couple of things. Jove, I have been saying Jehove for so many years. It's Jove. I learned that today. I learned something new. is an open source tool that allows you to identify what the file format is, see if it's well formed. So if you have like a mystery thing that doesn't have a file extension, or you're just trying to get a sense of like what kinds of file formats you have in an accession or a collection, Jove is a great tool. Another tool is Pronom, which is a registry that is maintained by the UK National Archives, and it's basically a registry of all of these different file formats and technical specifications and information about them. They even have, I didn't know this until recently, they have migration pathways, so you can actually, they keep profiles about like how to turn Word documents into PDFs. That's a bad example because that's an easy one, but more obscure legacy file formats and what the migration path is to like a contemporary program readable file. So for example, I've searched FileMaker here because FileMaker, with every new release of FileMaker Pro, released a new file format, which drives me absolutely bonkers, but those are all in here and information about those is in here. They also have a tool called Droid that will identify file formats using this Pronom database. Really, really useful. These tools you will see in tons of digital archives workflows. They're just really, really useful. And they also pull other types of metadata that are useful for various things. The Library of Congress, of course, maintains a lot of really good sustainability information about these formats. I've linked those there. And then the last thing I'm going to recommend is the Data Hoarder subreddit. This subreddit is specifically for hobbyist digital archivists and librarians. They actually call themselves digital librarians, which I love. It's a really great niche community of people who are saving data in a ton of different forms for a ton of different interests and hobbies and purposes. And if I find a weird thing that I've never heard of before, this is often the first place I'll go, because you'll find somebody who knows something about this weird program that was only released once in the late 80s, and I don't even know what to do with it. Somebody on the Data Hoarder subreddit will know a even more specialized forum to point you to. So this is just an example of the kind of stuff that you can find on Data Hoarder. It's been active for a really long time, and there's just so much good information kind of in this subreddit. If you don't use Reddit or have never used Reddit, just to, it's an internet community, you're going to get some trash. But I think that this is a often underutilized resource, and that we should generally be looking for to hobbyists for a lot of this information when we don't have it in kind of our official professional databases, resources, etc. So that's my curveball that I always throw in there. I've also in this handout and other places included some just like lists of tools and what they do, because I think that can be really useful sometimes. One of these that I haven't seen a lot until somebody from this Investment Open Infrastructure organization presented it to an interest group that I'm a part of. This is a really awesome kind of registry of open repository tools. I don't know about you, I had to do a compare and contrast functional requirements kind of discovery project for when we were migrating repositories, and this would have been so useful. And then there are other lists that are linked as there as well. But I just kind of, before we move into, apologize for kind of being over my 40 minutes of projected presentation time, but before we move into the last part of this workshop, I just want to impart on you, if nothing else, I want you to walk away with the idea that all of this is constantly changing. And no matter if you're brand new or upskilling, or you've been a digital archivist for 30, 40 years, what it takes to do digital archives work is actually just the ability and the willingness to learn new things all the time. That is what I look for when I'm hiring. That is what I think is the most important kind of quality of a digital archivist especially, but you can make the argument for broader in our profession, like that's a really important skill. So this is, if you're looking to develop your school skills as a digital archivist, really just facility with where to find all of these things and how to get started is the most important thing that you can possibly learn. So special thanks to Michelle, who I need to add to this slide. Sorry, Michelle. James Turrett, who's my colleague and eternal sounding board for all of these ideas. Everyone at the DLF Professional Development Network session this year that kind of inspired me to want to give this presentation. Ashley Bluer, who I just like, I think is the greatest of all time, honestly. And this is my cat and my dog who are checking my presentation. This was taken last night, so they helped too. And here's my email if you have any questions. So before we move, I'm going to stop the share just briefly because I want to allow for any clarifying questions and then to stop the recording before we move into our collaborative workshop.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. So we do have a couple of things in the Q&A currently. We have a thank you so much for these programs. I appreciate all the information from Michelle, Ariel, Siegel. My apologies if I didn't say that correctly. Made a couple comments. He said, I did the novice to know how pathway during COVID. I knew some of it already, but it was first-rate reviews. Sharon McKean.
Sharon is amazing. Yeah, Sharon is just incredible. Yeah,
who created
absolutely.
the pathway recently, created a new course, and I can add the link that he added into the chat.
Oh, perfect.
He also said, for now at the Library of Congress, the Bagger interface is still sometimes used. It's compatible with Java 8, which is still supported.
Yeah, a lot. The Bagger interface is installed on a lot of our staff computers, and they prefer to use to create bags that way. Not sure about the future of that tool, but it is, I think, at least for now, still downloadable and usable if you prefer a graphical user interface. So thank you for that note.
Yeah, and then we have from an anonymous attendee a question, would love advice about how to talk to your IT department about giving you command line access when they're resistant because of security.
Yeah, that's a hard one. It's really hard. I have an IT department that I haven't had this issue with, so I'm really lucky in that way. But I know a lot of people struggle with this, and I think that if possible, first of all, plugging the Digital Preservation Coalition has some resources for how to talk to IT, specifically about like digital preservation storage needs. But I think there's a lot of like really, really good advice and talking points that the Digital Preservation Coalition has curated for that resource. I think if at all possible, bring kind of examples of what you want to do and the programs that you want to run, because a lot of IT folks are rightfully scared about giving people, super user access to a lot of things, especially like networked resources. But if you can show them like, no, I literally just want to run Tesseract and I need the command line to do it, that may be helpful. Again, this could be an entire conference of how to talk to IT about our needs in digital archives and digital presentations or digital preservation.
Thank you. And then let's see. Another anonymous attendee asked, any tutorials for Jupyter notebooks? I didn't understand how to use at all. Thanks.
Yes. I can think of tutorials off the top of my head, but I don't know exactly where to point you. But I will add those to the handout before I put it into the Merrick repository. Because I added the Jupyter Notebook slide, I think like 2 minutes before this presentation, because I was like, oh yeah, they should know about Jupyter Notebooks, but there are really good tutorials out there.
Okay, thank you. And then Douglas Cook asked, what is the best archival media management software for digitized photos?
I don't even know how to begin to answer that question in terms of best software, but that the InfraFinder resource and some of the lists of tools that I linked in the handout are going to be good places to start. We use Islandora for our digitized photos. Islandora is an open source software which has its own challenges and roadblocks. I don't really believe in like one out of the box product that's even like a vended product that's going to like meet all use cases. But I think some of these registries that are popping up are really going to be useful for you.
Great. And then we have one last question from an anonymous attendee. Are there any specific coding classes you would recommend for a novice?
There are so many. And it's I'm going to actually save that for the collaborative kind of crowdsourced Q&A because I'm sure other people have some thoughts about it. I took a class in my actual college and grad school education, but I've also taken. It used to be called Linda. It's now like LinkedIn Learning, and there were some good ones on that. And I have mixed feelings about using LinkedIn and the LinkedIn Learning platform, but there's some good ones on there too.
We actually have a couple more Q&A questions. I don't know when we want to. Do you want to continue?
Yeah,
answering?
let's go ahead and I see the one about the legacy media digitization vendors, and I do have some thoughts about that. But I want to go ahead and move this to a community discussion.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and ask to stop the recording if we haven't done that already.
Yes, we will stop the recording now.